Hi friends, so if you want to learn about the backend development, in this video I am going to tell each detail about you, like the fundamentals, what are the different components, what you need to learn to become a backend developer, or if you're already a backend developer, how you can grow more in your career. My name is Prem Asimjan and I have 15 plus years in backend development. Right now I am the engineering lead in my company for the identity platform. So without any further delay, first let's understand what is backend development. So let's look into the fundamentals. I'll go with 6 points which will cover everything with the help of this interactive diagram. So the fundamental is whenever you develop an application, it has separation of concern. Like there is a front end, like in mobile phone or the website which you see, which opens in browser, that is the front part, and the backend part is the code which would give you the details of the user or which would process the things for you. For example, when you're trying to place an order, making the reservation, so it interacts with database. So the part or the code which deals with data or databases or which provides the input, output or the data to the UI, which is the front end, that kind of thing is called as the backend. Now you might need to learn about what is client server. So server is a backend server and client is your mobile phone or a browser. So when you ask for, let's say, a sports team score or match score, so it would go to backend server, and backend server will fetch the data from database about, let's say, which player made how many runs and things like that, and return it to the UI, right? Feel free to ask any questions on the comments. I don't want to go much detail here, but I can make a separate video because I have to cover all the 6 sections within like 10 minutes. So DNS and hosting is domain name server, and how you have to host it. These are like the fundamentals. Now coming to part 2, if you know the fundamentals of backend, what are the programming languages you can use or you need to learn for backend development? There are several languages, but it depends on each language has its own pros and cons. Java is mainly used as a backend development for enterprises like banks and bigger enterprise. They use Java since last 20 plus years. Second is Python, which is really quick, like you can make things really fast, but sometimes it doesn't scale well. It doesn't have a lot of constraint. So for any kind of quick or smaller application, Python is good. I use it a lot, and especially for AI and especially for the machine learning stuff, there are a lot of libraries in Python. JavaScript is not that great in backend. It's great on UI, but the developer who knows JavaScript, as he is working on Angular or on the UI side, can always leverage Express Node on the backend. Then there is C hash, Rust, Go. So I'll talk about Go. I'm an experienced Go developer. Go language is really strong. It's a little bit harder, like it's not easy as Python, but it is very performant. So the performance is the key. That's why a lot of places people are rewriting their application in Go, because it takes less resources and provides better output. Now, once you have good hold on the basics of the programming language, or you have already mastered this, then the third most important thing for the backend role or backend development role is good hold on the database. So in the data layer or the data management, there are mainly few things which you need to learn. First is, let me explain you what are the database types. So there are SQL, NoSQL and NewSQL. SQL is select star from blah blah, that kind of thing, which is SQLite, MySQL, all these things. MongoDB is a NoSQL database, or DocumentDB is another. Amazon has its own flavor. There are a lot of these NoSQL databases. The difference between SQL and NoSQL is NoSQL can be like a JSON based, just a document. It is dynamic structured. There are less constraints. It might have eventual consistency, so you can deploy like horizontal scale it. So you can have like 10 servers, and if you need more traffic, you can add any legacy or cheaper servers and make 10 to 20 very easily. So you can handle the traffic easily by scaling horizontally. However, in SQL, mainly you have to scale up. There are several options with several flavors. New SQL is kind of combination of both SQL and NoSQL, wherein you will get the ACID transaction. ACID transaction means a consistent commit with just like the SQL, but then you get the flexibility of horizontal scaling, dynamic structure, and you don't have to have very much constraint. The SQL has like a lot of constraints, basically the schema definition and all that. In NoSQL it's less. New SQL is kind of best of both worlds. Okay, so let's go to second part. You need to know the databases and how to query, because MongoDB query or NoSQL query is very different from select star, from blah blah, how you see it in SQL. It's like a document filtering. I am a MongoDB certified developer. On my YouTube channel, I have a detailed video on MongoDB. Let's go to ORM, which is Object Relational Mapping Frameworks. So if you are doing Java, and the Hibernate would help you to convert the or map the table, like SQL table, directly with your object in the Java. So you don't have to write a lot of queries or make a lot of joins and things like that. Hibernate framework will take care of that. Once the query happens, it would load the data inside your POJOs like on the Java objects. So that's where the Hibernate comes in picture. There are different flavors in ORM here, like SQLite and SQL Alchemy, and there are more. DB caching, Redis memcached, it is used to keep the frequent data. Example here is if you are trying to show user some of the deals or the orders. Now you don't want or user details, for example. So you don't want to hit the database every time when you're trying to get the user details. What you do after doing the first query in the database, you can cache it on the database caching layer. So next time, first the request would hit the cache. It will get the data, so response time is faster. If the cache is missed, like the data is not here, then only it will hit the database. So it's performance efficiency, it saves cost, it's like the response time is faster. So these are optimization. Now let's go, this is very important, the APIs and the web services. So whatever the backend development you do, basically, ultimately the data can be communicated with the front end using one of these APIs, mainly one of these APIs. There might be others. So first is REST, which is representational state transfer, wherein you typically get a JSON like as part of the get, put, post, delete request. So you'll get the request body and then you would respond back in JSON. It's like a fixed contract wherein you get request and then you respond. The flexible portion, just like REST, is GraphQL, which is developed by Facebook. This is mainly mobile friendly because this would reduce overfetching or underfetching of the data. What does it mean is you can have flexible queries, because in REST, if you say get user details, it might give you user's address, like everything which you might not need. So it adds to the latency, it adds to the network traffic and data and all that. So if you just need user display name, you can just get it by doing the GraphQL queries. Now SOAP is another form by which UI requests the data to the backend service, but it's legacy and it's XML based. gRPC is mainly server to server binary way of transferring the data. It is fast and effective for servers to server call, and it uses protocol buffers, which is called as protobuf instead of JSON. So gRPC is ideal for the microservice communication. Now, whenever you hit a backend service to get any detail about the user or anything, there is a very important layer which is called as the authentication and security. It means that if I am trying to get my user details, then I have to provide some kind of token, JWT, or I have to provide API key or follow OAuth 2 flow. Otherwise, I cannot get my details. This is how you filter hackers from just hitting your backend server and grabbing any details from that server or from the database. So it's a security feature. So how when you log in, basically first time you have to prove your identity by ID, password, or multi-factor authentication, like one-time code on your cell phone or email. You provide that, and then you get JWT tokens, or any kind of token for that matter. So you have to provide that, and then if that is correct, it is valid, then you will be able to fetch the data from the backend server. More details in my YouTube channel videos you can find on JWT. I have a detailed video. Similar with like the API keys is you have to provide credential that you are someone who has the proper key, and then only you can get the data. Now let's go to the fifth portion, which is very interesting. It's like server and hosting. So you have, imagine you have an application which you have written in Python and web application or using REST API. Now you need to host it so rest of the world can fetch it. Let's say example of you are providing the score for the cricket matches, like which team is on top in the cricket World Cup and which team is at the bottom, what's the scores and things like that. So you have to place it at a server, and that can be hosted either in AWS, Amazon Cloud, or Azure Microsoft Cloud, or GCP, which is Google Cloud Platform. It has backend hosting options. You can just spin up a virtual machine VM and copy your server side code and run the Python process. It would start working. You can have WAF like other services like firewalls to protect your web service, which are the things in AWS. You can watch my videos on AWS wherein I have explained the WAF, wireless application firewall, and other cool stuff to safeguard your server. Now let's talk about the containerization. If you don't want the hassle to deploy things basically on AWS on VM, you can just make a image which has your code, and then you can deploy it on Kubernetes. Basically it's available either on premises or on any of the cloud. They provide Kubernetes as service. So you just deploy your containerized image and it would work flawlessly. You can scale up, down, monitor, like do a lot of things. One more option is you can just run the reverse proxy Nginx or Apache server, which can connect to your backend service, which might be running on the same host or somewhere else, and can respond it. Now, last but not least, very important is the DevOps part or the deployment part of this service. Now, what I explained here is this like a one-time thing. If you have to do, it's fine, but you have to continuously like do releases, make software changes, since it's agile, and you can't do it manually. It's error prone, it's time consuming, and it's not a good idea. That's where the DevOps CI/CD pipeline comes in, or infrastructure as code, which comes in. So CI/CD is GitHub Actions or Jenkins, or you can also see GitLab CD. What it essentially do is it would pull the latest code from your master or whichever branch, perforce, wherever you have to pull the code, and then it would build the code, build the deployables, and then deploy it on the servers, either Kubernetes or AWS, GCP, whatever is your structure. It can do it by the press of the button once you have the Jenkins pipeline established or the GitHub action configured. IAC is another interesting thing, which is the infrastructure as code, which means that instead of clicking through the menu buttons on AWS cloud or the cloud provider, you can write each and everything, including your HPA, like your high availability configurations on a file that can go through the review, and then you can run those recipes or that stuff using Terraform or Ansible. The benefit, and this is a separate portion, but you need to know, like as a backend developer, sometimes the backend team owns the DevOps part, like the deployment part, monitoring part as well. Sometimes it's like a very separate thing, which a separate DevOps team takes care of the Terraform, Ansible recipes, books, run books, and things like that. Now, last thing is monitoring. Very, very important, because if you make a service which is not operational, which is down, which has errors, which can get hacked, and that's not good. So you will keep monitoring in place. It could be Datadog, Grafana, Prometheus, or ELK. So what these monitoring platforms do is they'll keep on monitoring if your service is up or down, like if it is available or not, and if it is available, how much is the latency, like the response time, and it can show you it in a graphical way. If there are any errors or there is outage, it can also provide notification on the pager duty or on the cell phone, basically any kind of notification which you configure. So I hope this video was helpful. Again, my name is Prem Asim Jain. I love to share and teach the tech stuff on my YouTube channel, and also have authored a book on Java design pattern. So I will close this video. If you have any questions, please mark them as a comment, and thanks for watching.